Hi, this is David Gornoski, host of A Neighbor's Choice and Things Hidden podcast, as well as some of our other programs like Science and You with our chief science advisor, Dr. Yu, and our seed oil survival series that we continue to have great fun unpacking the truth of nutrition. I wanted to give you a quick little message saying we appreciate all the support that we get from our monthly contributors and our one-time donation supporters. And we'd encourage all of you to go to our website, aneighborschoice.com, click on contribute, and make a monthly pledge today, whether it's $1, $5, 15, 20, 50, whatever you want to do. Doesn't matter. Just be a part of building this new media project that we've developed to empower and inform, to inspire, to kickstart a scientific renaissance, an anthropological breakthrough and reformation in the church. All these things are possible with your support right now. So make that commitment today and help us keep doing the productions that we have. Thank you. Well, we're back with another discussion with James Kourtides, our friend from the Rooster's Crow podcast. I'm David Gornoski, your host. How you doing, James?
I'm well, David. Good to be with you, my friend. It's always nice to see you.
Yeah, it's great to see you. And, I just wanted to kind of have a high-level conversation in light of current events. We have a lot of crazy stuff going on, as always, in current events in the West. And I put out this post that on Twitter that I thought kind of encapsulated where I'm thinking things feel right now. And I said that in these times, faith in an afterlife will increase, but hope for a future on this earth will grow dim. Christians must not be content with a return and a belief in heaven, but bring the future of earth into the present. And I was struck by that thought, and that's why I tried to capture what I was feeling and thinking there. But I think that because of how bizarre everything is, new atheism fell apart. People were becoming aware of paranormal, psychological effects. And, we were just talking about healing and the laying of hands. And people have scientifically documented people praying for someone's disease, and then the medical doctors say the tumor just vanishes. So we know that you can't keep everything down to dumb materialism and physicalism, and these outdated ideologies just really can't stand up into the future. And so the return, and people have made a comment about this in different levels. People have said there's the return of theology in academia. There's the return of spiritual considerations. There's a return of challenging, as I mentioned, materialism and dead matter atomism. And with that it comes open an opportunity to say, hey, the afterlife is more believable now. The idea that there's something that happens to you after death is becoming more mass conscious, acceptable. Conscious is able to accept maybe this is a real thing. Consciousness is able to say maybe consciousness survives us. But where I think we're in trouble, is if we stay, resting in that, then we haven't really done a good job of bringing Christianity into the conversation, because so many different traditions have always had a disembodied afterlife or some spirit world, or, New Age stuff has consciousness and all this stuff. But what Christianity says, which is unique, is don't just bet on the fact that there's an afterlife. Have hope and trust that there's life after the afterlife, that there's a resurrection on earth, and that we should be bullish on the future of Earth, planet Earth. That one's a harder thing for people to, I think, in this time to believe in than in the belief of the afterlife. Does that make sense?
Yeah, no, I think there's a lot of these considerations that are out in the mainstream now, which were previously relegated to kind of the fringes, spiritualists and things of that nature. But I think that we're essentially living in the afterlife, right? Like, why would you presuppose that the afterlife is after this life, right? Because the life is the vine, right? The life is the truth that Adam was given in the garden. So we are living in the afterlife, because the fall was after the afterlife, in a sense. And I like the idea also that we're living in eternity. We're nested within eternity. Like, it's not that this portion of our life ends and then there's eternity. We are living within it now, and it's about kind of bringing the kingdom of heaven to merge with earth, right? On earth as it is in kingdom, right? To bring the awareness and understanding of eternity onto earth. Of course, that's taken by the materialists and perverted into the idea of transhumanism and the idea of downloading your consciousness into computers, which is that to me is an extreme example of Gnostic imprisonment, right? The Gnostics are they're so sure of what they're thinking in terms of their materialists and whatnot. And the idea that we're going to digitize our consciousness and bring it into the machines, that's literally imprisoning it into a material network, which isn't possible, right? But who knows? Like, it might be possible where you have some sort of awareness that's being downloaded into machines, and then you're trapped with no way out. Like, but these conversations can happen now. And I think something that really, it's surprising. The world did end in 2012, right? We are living in a certain understanding of the materialist, new atheist, grasp of the world ended in 2012. And now we're seeing.
Why do you put that year as is that when their YouTube downloads went down? What's the for that?
You had the Mayan calendar. They talked about that at the end of this age happening in 2012. You have the precession of the equinoxes every 26,000 years. You even have the idea that of Terence McKenna had his theory of time wave zero. I think it was called, where he interpreted the I Ching, the Chinese divination book, and he came to a convergence of this date, not exactly 2012, right? It's divinization, so it's probabilistic. But I think there was, you're looking back now, remember the whole fear of 2012 and December 5th, 2012, that the world's going to end, there's going to be explosion or whatever it is. That's not what happened. But to your point, there was something that changed with the algorithms from a practical perspective, where people got social media on their phones, and then the algorithm really started changing in terms of how stuff was presented and recommended to people. But since then, really in the last 10, 15 years, the change has been so swift and dramatic. Imagine 15 years ago, 10 years ago, people in academia saying that, we're going to start segregating children in schools again. We're going to start castrating healthy boys and girls. We're going to start, all of these things that are presented now by the mainstream. 10 years ago, I think even the activists wouldn't believe that that's what's going to happen. So we've come so far in such a short period of time. I think people are just hoping that there's an afterlife. People are hoping that there's some spiritual reality now, because if things become so bleak, when the presupposition was that technology was going to liberate us and emancipate us, but it seems to have had the opposite effect. So people are hoping against hope.
Yeah, and they, that this rejection of common kind of good and common sense making is kind of like, I guess you could say that would be the death of the kind of dominance of the, liberal rationality, reason driven, classical liberal derived consensus that had dominated the mainstream discourse for some time. This kind of, this idea that, we wouldn't ever normalize segregation comes from that kind of reason driven rationalism or whatever, right? Then you're saying that the new atheism falling apart around that time was kind of like the last gasp of that return to enlightenment,
Yeah, I was just watching Peter Boghossian. Peter Boghossian? Yeah, philosopher. He's part of it. He works with James Lindsay and Helen Pluckrose. He was part of the studies, the sham studies that they put forth in those journals. Mm-hmm. he was talking with Richard Dawkins last week on his podcast, and he has something that I think he came up with in terms of title of the substitution theory. And he asked Richard Dawkins about the substitution theory, which is that when traditional, religions are eliminated, that essentially they're both atheists, right? They said that once traditional religions are eliminated, right, other religions are going to pop up which are horrific, that you can't get rid of this religious impulse. And Dawkins said, if that's true, then my whole life's work was meaningless, right? And there's this meme that encapsulates this perfectly. Says, the less religion there is in a world, and the world, the more rational and intelligent people become. It's a good religion. Its good religion is declining, and it has a bus, and then it has a train coming and just exploding the bus that says pregnant men, right? So let me see if I can see.
Yeah.
Here. So on the top it says, on the top is the Enlightenment idea, the new atheist. The less religion there is in the world, it's good. The more rational, intelligent people will become. It's good that religion is declining. And then you see the bus coming, which has pregnant men, just destroying that notion.
Yeah,
I think that. I mean, come on, like, I'm on these text threads with my family and friends. I'm like, you think men can get pregnant? Yes, men can get pregnant. I'm like, where did this thought come from? Did you believe that 5 years ago? Like, what do you mean men can get pregnant? Like, man, is this just a bigoted closet that I'm in where I can't come to terms with the idea that men can get pregnant? Is that me? Am I the problem, David?
Well, you look at, where they're getting this from, the social construct theories and postmodernity. And, they teach you that, words are weapons of power positioning, and words are not inherently symbols that can bear witness to some kind of objective truth, but are only a subjective use of power and position. And if that's true, then that would be very contagious for people who are resentful already, like, think about it. They don't even have to understand the conceptual thing, but the moment they start learning, wait a second, so gender is just a construction. So I can construct these words back to get revenge on people who tell me, no, there's a boundary, there's a limit, there's whatever. That's ultimately what's going on. Is, it's an attack on the idea of boundaries and differentiation. It all goes back to that differentiation is what they're at war against. And that's why we have to be careful, because, with the end of the sacred, of people believing in the unanimous guilt and justified purging of common threats or common enemies that are to be blamed, with the end of that comes something that had held together societies through differentiation and hierarchy to stave off the passions. And now the passions are running wild with envy and resentment. And there's no mechanism apart from the agape, self-emptying love of Christ to stop those passions from consuming us. The ancients, for all their mistakes, had built a kind of noble lie of the scapegoat. Even though they didn't believe it to be a lie, they believed it to be true. But objectively, it was a kind of stopgap lie that would maintain people's sense of order, right? To say, like, look, I can't just go freestyling chaotically, starting random orgies and stealing from everybody's hut and killing a guy who disrespects me. And, all this insanity just wasn't able to be just wildly tolerated because society understood instinctually that those are passions that will consume the culture. And so there were certain forms of ritual outlets for this aggression. And we didn't believe that we were doing it. We believed that the gods were animating us, or gods were providing some kind of salvific benefit for these sacrificial murders. But the moment the gospel tells us that it's murder, the whole show falls apart. But it's not just that. Some people who are more leftist Girardians tend to focus on the gospel's attack against the sacred and sacrifice, but they don't really get into its deconstruction of the self, right? Because if you hold both deconstructions together, now you have the problem of our current contemporary moment, which is that the sacred has been dissolving, even though people are still desperately trying to revivify it with the new in-group, out-group mediated by a legitimate sacrifice that we can all be forced into unanimously believing in, but we won't be, right? But then you have and that real new sacred really is the sacred of the self. It's the deification of the human self, and the ego into this construct of like a coalition of egoisms, right? That justify, hey, look, I can sacrifice you, James, with you're not going to be having access to the central bank digital currency because you spoke ill of the drag queen story time. So you're not allowed to eat this week, or you're going to have to your food budget allowance will be cut in half this week. So you better be careful next time you go around spouting that off online, right? So that's a new sacred, right? That's built on the deification of the ego, right? This overweight man who was never looked on with great fervor is allowed to sacredly indulge in their fetish in front of 3-year-olds. And if you don't like it, if you speak ill against that person's ego fetish, you will be punished. You will be sacrificed. But they can't construct they won't be able to create unanimity. They still believe that through persuasion, through domination, some of them believe more in the persuasion side, some of them believe in the domination side, some of them believe in propaganda. They still believe they can subjugate humanity and force them to comply with this construct of ego worship the way they define it. And they still believe, because the only way it will work is if it's unanimous. That's why they always have to say silence is violence, right? If you're not openly speaking in their language, you are creating violence against their sacred unity, right? And so that's what we have to wrestle with there,
Yeah. It's neo-Puritanism.
Yeah.
Right. Neo-Puritanism that is structured through this idea of equity. Right. And I've been thinking about this term and this idea of equity, which is which is guaranteed outcomes. Right. It's very subtle. A lot of the leaders in our political class don't really understand what it is. Bernie Sanders was asked about what he thinks about equity on Bill Maher show, and he didn't know what equity was. And it's on his platform on his website. Right. So it's sinister. Right. And they do these linguistic tricks. But equity, they conflate equity with equality, right? Equality of outcome and equality of opportunity. I was thinking equity is a good goal. And tell me what you think about this. Equity is a good goal for society to have, right? You want to have a society where people have an equal playing field and that outcomes are being more widely distributed because more people in the society are, through merit, increasing their competence and the good. And if civilization is oriented correctly, equity is a natural organic consequence because more people are having better outcomes because of the way society is structured. But the idea that those that are in the political class or the elites are going to mess with the levers and force equity as a top-down solution, it becomes demonic. Right. Because now you have to take people down that are excelling. You have to take people down that are competent. Right. In order to level the playing field, you have to take down the people that are, through meritocratic means, succeeding. And that's a very attractive idea for those that are, again, nihilistic, resentful, narcissistic, whiny, and things of that nature. And it really is a new Puritanism, because you have to have this purity of ideas, and these linguistic tricks. The linguistic tricks are a manipulation of the logos, right? Once you get rid of Christianity as the fundamental structure and force, the logos is then manipulated, right? Language is manipulated, and it's twisted and it's subverted. And we see that happening now. But what you can do pretty easily is just reverse that idea of social constructivism on the social constructivists. So if you're saying that men that men can get pregnant, and it's just a social construct, I'm going to say men can't get pregnant, but it's a social construct. So I agree. Let's say it's a social construct. So why is your definition better than mine? I'm just going to say trans people don't exist or whatnot, right? If you say that back to them, they're going to be like, how could you say that? Well, if it's socially constructed, who's to say whose perspective on these things is accurate? Because
their ideology is a virus operating on the software of Christianity. That's where the difference is. You see?
Absolutely. Yeah.
See, the reason why they're able to win that game culturally, right, is because they have the terms of the game have been designed such that they're always on the side of the person who looks to be on the cross.
Mm-hmm.
See, that's the trick. Okay. And that's something I've been trying to tell folks who are anti-establishment or conservative or whatever, Christian, whatever you want to call yourself. I've been trying to tell this to people. And I know it's a big idea, I guess. It's not that complicated, but I guess no one's saying it, so it's a little hard for it to catch on quickly. It'll take time, hopefully not too long. But the whole point of this thing is that we have to understand how to stand on the side of the scapegoat better than those who are fraudulently imitating that power, because that's what they're doing, man. That's what they're doing. They take so the whole game is, you're right. In theory, if we're playing their theory the way we understand it, everything is a social construct. So I can socially construct whatever argument back at them, and they can't tell me it's wrong because that's my truth. But their little trick that they use to subvert that my truthism going back against them is the objective truth of the innocence of the victim. You see, it's that. So they're still using the objective logos of the expelled victim, the stone the builders rejected. So they use the logic of history, which is the stone the builders rejected has become the cornerstone, and they say, how dare you do your social construction to silence this victim? And you say, what victim? It's an old man. And say, no, don't you know that they're that they are largely not accepted by folk culture in America? I mean, and it's true. If you take folk, Hispanic, Black, white culture in much of the country, they still have an uneasiness about, a man dressing up as pretending to be a garish cartoon version of a female. There's still a kind of uneasiness to it. And so from that basis of this is uneasy for still the majority, I wouldn't say vast, but the majority of the culture, that gives it validation as being a victim that must be defended as the stone that builders rejected in this moment, right? The builders being the cultural hegemony, and the stone being that person who is a bearer of an identity that is a transgression against normalcy, right? And so they have to screw with what is normalcy. They have to redefine normalcy to be carnival, to be the worship of passion itself,
Mm-hmm.
And that's where this is headed, and it's disturbing, but it's liberating when you see that the Gospels would explain all of this, and do explain all of this and predict all of this, that the mother will be against daughter against that. Well, you don't even know what a mother and a daughter is. So we're fulfilling that prophecy in real time. Yeah.
And we're living in an age of irony, just extreme irony. The idea that feminism, the ultimate, outcome of feminism would be men taking up space in women's spaces, be men wearing woman face, wearing woman face. We have the whole blackface phenomenon, and it's tricky, right? Because so are you not compassionate towards people that have gender dysphoria and feel that they're in the wrong body and they are ameliorated by taking on the expression, let's say, of a man that's in this case taking on the expression of female characteristics? Are you against that person having mental health, well-being? No, I'm not against that at all, right? And so they conflate the idea of the social contagion of men wearing women's face and being in women's sports with the idea of the very small percentage of people that have gender dysphoria that need compassion and care and mental health treatment.
Yeah, but again, but again, it's a hand trick, because they did this. So they don't believe that the gender dysphoria thing is not what they really believe, right? Gender dysphoria is what they use as the entry point to get you as a Christian to show compassion to their narrative.
Mm-hmm, exactly.
Because they don't believe in gender dysphoria. They believe that everybody is on a gender spectrum. So see, it's contradictory. See, they've got two arguments going on. But again, conservatives seem to lack the sophistication to be able to engage. And it's not that they can't. It's just that they don't want to engage in the sophistication of the trick that's being played on them, right? They're always, gender dysphoria. No, that's the trick. So that you say, oh my goodness, yeah, you wouldn't want to hit a man with glasses, would you? That's what Joker says to Batman, right? Don't put, gender dysphoria is what I've got. See, it's a problem. Have mercy. No, what they're saying is all of us have gender dysphoria because we're all in a spectrum of gender, so to speak. So that's just the trick to get their way into the discourse of mainstream respectability. And then they grab the power and say, oh, yeah, there was no dysphoria. It was always a spectrum. We just had to start that way to get our foot in the door, right? For the revolution of sense making. That's what they're doing.
I think let's reverse it on them again. It is a spectrum, right? And to say that gender is a spectrum presupposes two sides of the spectrum, masculine and feminine. And of course, you can have a man that has a predominantly feminine temperament, and you could have a woman that has predominantly masculine temperament. And there's a spectrum where you could slide. We're all gender fluid in a sense, but how does that essentially go from having this idea that we are all a mixture of the masculine and feminine, and from distribution, from a statistical perspective, most fall on the distribution relatively close to the physical expression that they have, man or woman, but it is a spectrum. So why should we presuppose that we attach a political identity to that spectrum, to that particular spot in the spectrum, and attach a pronoun to that particular identity, right? How are we not just talking about personality types? So we've taken the idea of personality types and we've attached a political identity towards it. And then we've taken that political identity, have called it a protective class, and essentially have created, this is what this idea of this neocultural Marxism, it is the case that's what's happening here, right? They're taking this idea, even though the idea of LGBTQIA plus, what do you mean plus, right? So it's the idea of gathering the marginalized and giving them political power. I think that's the idea from their perspective. And that's, I think, so because there's a big difference between gay men and lesbian women. And there's a huge difference between gay men and asexuals, right? They couldn't be further apart. Douglas Murray says this, those two categories cannot be further apart. Yeah. So what's the logic of attaching all of these different, political identities into this category? That is the subversive category. That is the queer. The term queer means to rot. It means to dislodge. It means to subvert, right? So it's packaging this LGBTQI plus is the subversion that's being installed. It's the Trojan horse that's being put into the system to rot it from the inside out.
The plus is the inversion of thou shalt not covet thy neighbor's this, that, or anything else. Anything else in the Ten Commandments says at the end, and anything else that belongs to thy neighbor, right? That's the plus on that 10th commandment, right? It says, thou shalt not covet thy neighbor's wife, thy neighbor's donkey, thy neighbor's Cadillac, thy neighbor's football passes to the NFL, thy neighbors, or anything else that belongs to your neighbor. So the emphasis is on coveting the neighbor, and all the different objects that they have infinitely are opportunities to covet thy neighbor through those tokens that they have, right? And so when you see LGBT and plus, that's and anything else that you desire to be, right? So that's the reversal of that 10th commandment. Has anybody ever said that before? I don't know, but I just made it up. I think it sounds true because it's plus is infinite desire, right? Anything else that you desire to be. You want to desire to be an animal, you want to desire to be a German shepherd, or you want to desire to be a German shepherd who's blind, who has issues with white culture. You can have any any kind of covetous desire can be subsumed into the plus, so that it does become the opportunity. You're right. It's beyond sex or any of that. It's really the plus is the impetus to have infinite worship and deification of one's desires.
Mm-hmm. That's interesting. Yeah, I never thought of it like that. I think that's interesting. Are you against gay people?
Well, I don't think any Christian could be against people, right?
No, exactly. So like I don't have any problem with like people that I meet, whether they're gay, transgender, whatever it is, right? That's my brother and I love them, or my sister and I love them, and I will develop a relationship with them and get to know them, right? So I have no issue with people, and I think people that are suffering, deserve compassion, but this is done at a personal level. And that's, again, with this inversion trick that you're talking about here, it's applied to the collective level, where if you have an issue with the political category that's being, tyrannically imposed on a society, you're against individual people that might have proclivities that are, gay or whatever they are. So if you're against this political category, you're against individual people and you're a bigot and whatever that you are. That's not the case though, but they're very clever and they're very good at using these tactics. It's encouraging to see. It's both encouraging and a little, disconcerting to see a reaction from the right, because there's actually a reaction now. There's actually a defense that's being put forth, and even 5 years ago, that defense was completely not evident at all. It was just full bore, right? But then you're going to see kind of the pendulum swinging the other way, where you're not going to have appropriate kind of Christian response. Look what happened in Nazi Germany, right? I hate to bring this example up, but the first people to go were the transgender gay people, right? Because there was an explosion in Weimar Germany of these bathhouses, and the first transgender surgery, if I'm not mistaken, was done in Weimar Germany. And when Hitler came, it said, these people are the degenerates, they're ruining your society, and they were the first to go and be killed, right? So that response from the right is disconcerting as well. That there has to be a pushback, but that's where we have to navigate.
But that's what I'm saying. And one of the things that I focus is why I don't get into denominations and stuff on this program is because we have got to actually follow and imitate Jesus. Okay. And when what happens is, and I will say this over and over again, that when you get so fixated on your tribe, like, oh, the world is nihilistic, I must turn to the truth, pick a team. And then your focus is worshiping your team rather than actually learning how to imitate Jesus. Because if you did imitate Jesus, we would have the blueprint available to us to navigate from the pitfall of the dialectic. You cannot ever win by reacting. Okay. And these folks that want to use force to clamp down and stamp things down, they are the lifeblood. They are the fuel of the degeneracy. Without their reaction, there is no degeneracy. And the Christian who imitates Jesus knows this and is the adult in the room and knows how to not fuel it to the best of the Holy Spirit's power in them, right? And I can't seem to get a single person, except for us, a few conversations and different people on this program, to fully really get this in the discourse. I probably need to do more effort to try to get this communicated to the public, because all they do is go back into their little LARPing of, I will take photos of me in a meadow as I'm a trad. No. That's fine. Eat your peaches, have a good time. That's fine. But that's not how you do this. Okay. Blowing up a Budweiser bottle doesn't do anything. You are giving them the power. You are submitting to them. You are owned by them when you blow up a Budweiser bottle, because it's not just the drinking of it, but it's the blowing up of the bottle that gives this hive mind its power, its fuel. It has nothing without it. And so, that's what Jesus is teaching you, right? He's teaching people who are occupied by an imperial power and then levels of corruption in their local community. And he's teaching them step by step how to not fall into the pitfalls of giving this thing more power, right? Oh, Jerusalem, if you had only known the ways of peace, right? Oh, America, if you had only known the ways of peace, you wouldn't be subjugated by this hostile occupation, right? Of wokeness, or whatever the stupid word will be in a few years, right? But they don't know, because it's hidden from their eyes. But it shouldn't be hidden from their eyes, because we've had 2,000 years to get this right.
Yeah. Well, it's a spell. How do you break the spell? When Christ, in the story of the Samaritan woman who was being stoned, Gerard comments on this, don't look at them in the eye. He's not saying that you start throwing stones back. He's saying, don't look at the mob in the eye. Right. So how do you interpret that? How do you operationalize that?
Because when you look in their eyes, when you look at the left's eyes, you want the power that they desire. That's the spell.
It's like the ring. How do you break the spell? Can it be done? I don't think it can be done rationally through rational discourse.
Every day. You have to practice it every day. Yeah. So whatever it is that your particular weak point is, that we might have a few, you might have 100. Your weak point is you mimetically get into insults when someone disrespects you. Your mimetic point may be shopping. You like to buy stuff all the time, or whatever it is that mimetically draws you in. practice every day resisting that on the little things, and learning how to let those desires pass through you, and recognizing that they're being triggered by people around you in your past memory or in your immediate surrounding who are modeling that behavior that triggers you to reciprocate it. And once you do that, because people usually, people typically, fall into a lot of temptations and stuff socially, right? Even the person who's eating ice cream endlessly at night, watching late night television, is still doing it socially because they're watching other humans in their isolation that are kind of giving them a sense of community. And they're also doing things that other people model for them online or in person or in their childhood. So they're still operating on models, even though it looks like there's no model in their immediate vicinity. Practice those little ones first, and that will give you the strength as a spiritual muscle, as a discipline, to then engage in that when it comes to the spirit of our age. The spirit of the age comes at you and says, we're going to impose force. And then you can reciprocate that with, no, we're going to heal cancer. So you just change the whole discourse. They say, here's big boy dressed up as a drag. And you say, hey, let me help you with your diabetes. So you change the subject. You change the subject because that's what a leader does. He doesn't mimic. Oh, I don't like you. You're not a woman or whatever, right? That's reciprocate. That's being, a follower. That's being mimetically owned by the matrix. But you as the leader, you have a vision, like Jesus, because that's what Jesus does, man. That's what we're supposed to imitate him. Jesus, people would confront him with a fake trap. What? And what would he do? He would change the subject to the truth, right? He would find what their true issue is, right? Where's your husband? To the Samaritan, right? Or to the guy who says, how do I inherit eternal life? And he tells him, love God with all your soul, heart, mind, whatever, and then love your neighbor as yourself. And it says, the guy seeking to justify himself says, well, who's my neighbor? And so he tells the story of the neighbor being the guy who is in the enemy camp, the Samaritan, who's considered to be dogs by the guy who's asking to be justified for himself. And the guy that's the hero in Jesus's story about who is a neighbor is a guy who doesn't even believe that Jesus's father was ever in the temple on that mountain, Mount Moriah. He doesn't believe. So he's an atheist in that sense. He doesn't believe God's home. God's not on that mountain. Now, he's not a true atheist, but he's an atheist in the sense that he rejects the God that is truly God, according to the people who's asking the question, who's my neighbor? Who is my neighbor is the question that answers the first question, how do I have eternal life? Because if you become a good neighbor, then you fulfill what it means to have eternal life. And Jesus intentionally picks a guy who doesn't even believe that God's house is occupied by God the entire time, not just in the second temple stage, but the whole time. And he says, go and be like him. The guy who doesn't even get it right in his head, but he still puts his life on the line for his neighbor. And it takes putting your life on the line to say to the right, I'm not taking your comfort of reacting to Bud Light. I'm going to heal diabetes. Because now you're left out on your own, just like the man, like the Good Samaritan. He's left out on his own. He goes out of the comfort zone to help a person of an enemy tribe. Who is there to defend him at that point? The Jews won't defend the Samaritan who's helping the man in danger. The Samaritans won't help the man who's helping the man in danger because he's betraying the Samaritans' tribalism by going and helping their enemy. Who is there to help him? Who is there to help you when you say, let's have cold fusion? Who is there to help you when you say, hey, let's not have a drug war? Who is there to help you when you see Sound of Freedom and you see child trafficking and you speak the truth, which is dismantling these powers would be done through nonviolent means? Who is there for you? Who is there to defend you when you go to the aid of the victim? There is no one there really but God. And that's what allows you to be like Christ. And nobody wants to do that. And so nobody tries it. And so therefore nobody's there for you when you do it. So it's like a, it's a catch-22, right?
So let me give you a little counter programming or play devil's advocate a bit. It's quick on your point where you say nonviolence. I was watching, I forgot who made this point of Gandhi. People think that Gandhi was against violence. He was not against violence. He was pro nonviolent, but he said that, it takes a real spiritual will to be nonviolent. If you don't have that kind of will, violence is your next step. He says, then take up arms. Right, to get to that nonviolence is really, I'm kind of butchering a bit, but what about to the rebuttal? It's like, yeah, these aren't new ideas. We've had this Christian understanding for 2,000 years, and what's happened? It didn't lead to us, it didn't lead to this revolution. It didn't lead to us loving our neighbors, and now we're seeing the destruction and the fragmentation of not only just the denominations, but Christianity as a whole is receding. So it didn't work. It didn't catch. So what, how do we, are we just going to put all our money on that everybody will now personally start authentically imitating Jesus, and that's our only way to salvation? Like it didn't work. Christianity didn't work. Look where we're at.
Well, you have to think about this. Has anybody tried imitating Jesus really? I mean, nobody really tries it.
We had the Catholic Church. It's been around for so long. The Pope,
okay, what does it mean to be the Catholic Church? I mean,
well, from a historical perspective, Christianity was there was no other religions really, right? Christianity, was in terms of the West, right? It was completely, wedded politically, economically, together, and society was built from this marriage, and it led to where we're at now. So what happened? What was the problem? What happened with Christianity, where we are now in a place where we're seeing it receding? We're seeing, sure, I agree with you that all these things are popping up now, and I agree with you that we shouldn't be feeding the fuel of the fire of the culture war by being a complicit in the dialectic. But how do we look at the what appears to be the failure of Christianity collectively, universally, with where we're at now?
Because it's dependent on our free choice to go and save the one who's an injured, like the Samaritan. And so here's what I'm trying to get at about that. So I think Jesus takes a guy as the protagonist about how do you inherit eternal life, who's got it wrong in his head on purpose. Because your appeals you just made are all going to reflect on institutions who appeal to, we've got it right in our head about what it means to be Christian. But Jesus does it. So the point isn't that there isn't important to ever try to be right in your mental precepts about God, but rather, is that really the ground by which you become like God? I would say probably not. Because why in the world would God himself choose a story where he specifically takes a guy who's got it wrong in his head, but's got it right in his heart, and puts his skin in the game to save his enemy? That's the flow of how our Christianity should manifest. It's a renewing of the mind. It's taking on the mind of Christ. Taking on the mind of Christ is not some abstract thing. It's an actual studying of Jesus's life and then asking God's Spirit to allow you to mimic his attitudinal approach to every single situation he encounters, mapping onto every situation that you encounter. So when you, what everybody does in religion, I'm sorry, is they take Jesus and they put him behind safety glass and they put a caution tape and they say, don't go there.
Mm-hmm.
Don't go there.
Yeah.
And then they do, some of the Protestants say, where do you go? You go through beliefism. So hold on to your belief in Jesus as your attainment to Christ. You go to the institutional church, it's the baptism, it's the Eucharist, it's the church, it's the it's don't go, everything. And there's a lot of caution tape around just imitating Jesus. And every one of those traditions will tell you, yeah, you can try to imitate Jesus, but that's kind of a side issue for them. And I'm saying that's everything in Jesus's book. you know? Like, I don't care.
Yeah.
At some point, you got to understand that going through the rituals of your church is not the same as walking on water necessarily. At some point, that's got to click for Christians. That doesn't mean that those things do not have, that doesn't mean that they can't be means of walking on water in some sense. If your attitude's right, when you're, the attitude of why we do those things, right, is it can be geared towards a kind of walking on water. But ultimately, those rituals that people are doing are supposed to be exercise. They're supposed to be tools to allow you to get into the right attitude all the time and then actually walk on water. So walking on water is taming the circumstances of your existential moment day by day in meeting your neighbor in a radical agape love. That's it. And so, but they don't want to do that, man. So they're always going to, all the little teams that we like, they're always going to put their little teamism stuff, their distinctives, because they're caught up in mimetic rivalry. That's the problem. That's the problem. That the churches are caught up in mimetic rivalry, so much so that they're constantly defending their differentiation and distinction from the other tribe, even within the body that they're in. So, there's differences within Roman Catholicism, right? There's differences there's all kinds of factions and feuds. In the Orthodoxy, there's those David Bentley Hart, and then you have people like Jay Dyer. Do they get along on a lot of things? Probably not, right? But see what I mean? So there's always this, and so everybody's out there to make their distinctions. I mean, I've had Hart on and NT Wright, both, right? And I enjoy some of the things from both of them. And I was just in talking with both of them recently. But I have to say, it bothers me. And it's not bothering me, but it is a little disappointing that, you read the kind of like the way they argue with each other about each other's New Testament translations. It's silly and childish and on level with like an 8-year-old, like, gotcha. No, you're wrong. No, you don't even know what this word means. What are you doing? You don't. And you're like, wait a second. You guys are talking about this cosmic thing. You're talking big ideas. You've got so much beautiful poetry effusing your language about the love of God, and you're using very provocative insights to bring people to the picture of what God's doing in the world, but yet you can't stop and have enough self-awareness to realize you're justifying yourself rather than just truly humbly trying to serve the Lord. And I don't say that to preach down on them. They're elders and older people, but the point is that operates on everything we're doing. We're always justifying ourselves rather than actually being the good neighbor. And being the good neighbor answers the question of how do you inherit eternal life? And Jesus, given the chance, if he really cared about us getting it right about which team we're in, then why didn't he say, the good, faithful Jew like me went to the aid of his fellow Jew, right? You see what I mean? Why didn't he keep it within his in-crowd framework by which he was in and his interlocutor who's asking him a question was in that tribe, right? Why didn't he keep it there if he really wanted to emphasize good action with right belief? But he doesn't. He intentionally takes someone with incorrect belief to emphasize, right? What does it really mean to be in the kingdom of heaven? But all we do is we focus on the idea of right belief in various ways, and also right ritual, which is also right belief, because you're choosing to say, well, no, our form of baptism is correct. Our form of salvation is correct. Our form of confession is correct, not theirs. So everything is in distinction from the other. So you're obsessed with the other rather than you're worshiping your theological rival than you are worshiping Jesus. Because everything is fixated on, we're not Catholic, we're not Orthodox, we're not Protestants. And I get so sick of it because you see it everywhere. That's the cancer of the church. If we would stop that. And so why people don't want to stop that? Well, this is their stupid excuse that they give. Well, then we'll be ecumenical globalist New World Order people. What? How did you get that? What a lie from Satan, How do you go from stop fixating your entire faith identity as in contradistinction from the other team that's wrong? How did you get from stop doing that to, if I stop doing that, I'm a globalist who wants one world religion and what? How did that happen? But that's the mental prison that billions almost or millions of Christians are in. That right there. because I can't have that's why I don't tell people what my church is, because I don't want to get up in that mimetic stupidity. It's stupid mimetic worship of human beings. That's why I don't tell people my faith. I believe I'm a Christian, right? I do that on purpose to serve as a means of being able to have a conversation with folks without all their little mimetic idolatries popping up, right?
Yeah. It's really is pernicious, the idolatry. It's so pernicious in this whole idea of pick a team, my team versus your team. These people that we're talking about, these institutions, they're not purposefully, it's not explicit being, mimetic rivals. It's an implicit, unconscious, phenomenon. So, people would defend themselves. No, I'm following the mind of Christ. I'm following the Christ's commandments, and my view is that it's in this particular manner is the way to do it. And I will have a polemic conversation about that, so it's really, it's difficult when you look at it. I could see it personally in my personal life, with my family, the effects of following Christ's commandments and the fruits that bears. But once I look at the world, and I think that people will have to do this collectively in order for the world, for the kingdom to come, it's hopeless.
No, it's not. No, that's what that's
say,
Satan, though.
They say that, the revolution won't be televised, right? The revelation won't be televised. Like what is the world that we see in our digital media and that we see in our political institutions and that we see in our economy, or our capitalist economy, is that what's going to be transfigured? And that's going to be the kingdom of heaven? Is that all have to change? Everybody has to follow Christ's commandments, and that's what we're going to have to hope for. That seems hopeless, right? Because it's extremely difficult. People think that Christianity is a moral religion. Where
wait a second, look how quickly they caught on to this stupid wokeism. You don't think that the whole world can catch on to Jesus quickly?
Sure. Yeah.
Wait a second.
What do you mean catch on, though? Yeah,
like really catch on to it. Yeah. I mean, these people are really catching on with wokeism fast. They're already cutting their offspring's genitalia off. That's a pretty big buy-in. Jesus ain't asking you that. He's asking you to get baptized. You don't think the whole world can catch on like that? Oh, yes, they can.
It's going to take collective repentance and metanoia, right? And the tradition of the church. I can't
even get Christians to even begin to try to be nice to each other. I mean, I'm not asking to be nice. I'm asking to be like Christ. Jesus said self-emptying love is how you become eternal life.
Okay, perfect. I'd love to do that. That's what I want to do. I want to imitate Christ, follow his commandments, and have this self-emptying love, appropriately repent and love my neyber. That's what I try to do every day. Like,
self-emptying love is repentance, because you can't have sin if you're letting go of yourself.
So the whole goal of human life is to come in right relationship with God through Christ, right? And through that right relationship, the second and third order effects are the moral effects. Then you're, so it's a catch-22, right? You have to reorient yourself to a right relationship with Christ, with God, and through there, your relationships with your neighbors and your family and your civilization is appropriately oriented. Right. But it's also, you have to appropriately orient yourself with right relationship to your neighbor, to your civilization, and that gets you closer to God. So it's this feedback loop that is what orients things appropriately. You know what I'm saying? It's not either or. And it is like a spiritual catch-22. You have to do both. And I think from my experience, you can gauge your progress, right, by the nature and quality of the relationships that you have with those closest to you. And how they're progressing and whatnot. And then you become, and it's not something that happens overnight. It happens through a lifetime, quite literally. But everybody wants this, give me my psychedelics. Let me have a spiritual awakening. Let me get rid of these addictions. Then I'll love my neighbor. Just give me this experience. Give me this spiritual experience. We're chasing these spiritual highs all the time, thinking that that's going to wake us up to doing it.
Here's
the
good news. Like, I think most people don't fully understand how important, like what I'm getting at. See, because again, people don't want you to fixate on imitating Jesus' love on the conservative traditionalist side of religion, no matter what their tribe is, because they're afraid it'll draw you into the chaos of liberal, progressive insanity, right? Because
people think that following Christ's commandment is hating gay people. They think that's in the Bible and that's what Christ meant. So why would I be a bigot and follow Christ when he's saying that gay people are bad?
Or voting for someone who wants to put people in prisons where they could be raped because they got high. That's an abomination unto the Lord. How many Christian, let me ask you a question. How many Christian leaders are talking about what I'm talking about?
Yeah, I don't see any really, I don't
So
see
imagine if we could just get like five really well-known, people, just start with that. Like get five, you be it, whatever. Everybody just start thinking and talking this way and actually living this way and actually like just going over and over and over and repeating it. That would make a really big impact. Like, let's say that each of them were about as popular as a midday host on Fox News to not necessarily Joe Rogan level. Let's just say there's 5 people saying this message, what I'm saying, in different ways of rhetorical ability or whatever, and effect and style. 5 people who are literally saying, see, what I'm doing is, what I'm trying to say is like, keep your traditional values. I guess, you know what I mean? Like keep them. We're not telling you to get rid of them. In fact, the only way you can maintain them is to stop clinging to them as idols, and then go run to your neighbor and love your neighbor and cure their diabetes. I keep saying that, but it's so true. Cure the diabetes, but they can't hear that because they want to fight, because they're worshiping their rival. They're worshiping the left. They're worshiping Cain or Abel or whatever. They're so fixated on beating that other person. They spend all of their energy, and all it takes, you keep saying it's so hard to get everybody. No, people will follow. So what we need to do is get like 5. Start with 5. We'll get to 12 eventually. And I'm being.
I don't think they're going to be. There's more than 5, but they're not.
Who?
They're not on the TV. They're not on the TV. They're not.
But that's what I'm saying. If you want to
have social cachet, that social cachet is antithetical. Yeah.
So there's nothing wrong with not being on TV, but because you're right, these things do take time.
Yeah.
And so someone who's doing things quietly in their own life will have reverberating effects for generations. That will be like you said, a ripple effect of magnetic field of love, of agape love being imitated by those who are impacted by their life. But if you want to have a more like ambitious, let's get into the middle of Mars Hill like Paul did and contend with the faith in the public square. The public square now has access to millions of people. So that's an awesome responsibility and an awesome tower to climb. And if you want to do that, get 5.
Mm-hmm.
Get 5. Yeah. I'm just making an, because that's my hand. 5. Take 5 people and just like get them to that discourse level and get them into the zeitgeist. Let them be the Falwell who's on TV. Jerry Falwell used to be on TV on MSNBC, giving the Christian moral majority perspective on what the Bible says about this issue in the news. Have 5 of those, but doing it what I'm talking about. Agape, nonviolent love, who doesn't throw out the foundations of differentiation. Just do 5.
Have you seen the movie Jesus Revolution?
Yeah.
That's exactly. I mean, what is that about? It's about the calcified, stratified churches that were dying in that area, and you have this hippie that comes, and he wasn't criticizing the churches or whatnot. He was just coming and shit. That's an interesting movie. What'd you think? What's your take on it?
I liked it. Yeah, I thought I think
isn't that what you're talking about?
Kind of. Yeah. I mean, what I'm talking about is just it looks differently in different places. It would look like maybe a church thing like that, but it may not look like a church thing. It may look like a podcast Jordan Peterson thing, like what we're doing, I mean, I don't know what it may look like it's showing up in the church revivals. It could. I think we need Billy Sunday style tent revivals. And it's led by folks who are Orthodox and Catholic and Christian, Protestant and whatever. And they're all just, and you're not leading with that. You're not leading with that. You're leading with cure the healing, cure the diseases, cure the cancer, cure the mental illness, cure the diseases. Yeah. And I mean, literally the diseases, but also all the other stuff. Because, think about it. Like Adam Curtis has that documentary series on BBC and online about, I think it's on that. Yeah. But it's about, the century of the self.
Yeah. I watched it a couple times.
Yeah. And it's about this rise of this dominating psychology field. Right.
Mm-hmm.
So, the church was supplanted by this, therapy industry and psychology as the dominant means of healing social dysfunction. And they haven't done a good job. And the churches, by and large, either imitate that therapeutic approach in their worship or if they're like old school and apostolic, they still kind of basically say, yeah, well, you need a therapist for that to help you with a lot of that stuff, but we'll do, the non-therapeutic stuff in our church, and then you got to get most of your. But it's like, wait a second, that field failed because spiritual warfare laughs at mentalism as the main problem. No, it's not the main problem. There's a whole layers and layers of this. There's diet. There's things gone in your gut that make you go wild. There's things in your thyroid. Dr. Broda Barnes wrote about how people were divorcing in his practice because he found out they had different thyroid levels. I mean, think about the alienation dysfunction that children are experiencing because your thyroid's off. So much stuff to talk about. The Christians are whole body people. We're mind, body, soul people. We should be the ones talking about integrating diet, nutrition, all these things, not as a new rule. We don't want to be the next Seventh-day Adventists or whatever coming up with a new dietary rule to be our team. No, we're not going to do that.
The new food pyramid.
Yeah, look, vegetable oils are toxic, so they're, that's going to have to be a new rule to some degree because it's literally like putting rat poison in your body. It's not like a food item that people eat too much. It's literally rat poison. But besides that, we've got to be able to come to the table and say, okay, let's get 5. If you want to do it that way, every one of us should be doing it. But if you want to do the whole like mediated through discourse in the public square thing, we need to raise up 5.
I think it's happening. Like Jonathan Peugeot is a good example, like Jordan Peterson. It's not happening in the old media, right? It's happening in the new media and the podcast space. Even someone like Jay Dyer is bringing a lot of people to a more accurate understanding of what it means to be a Christian, even though he's more polemical. David Bentley Hart, those folks are getting people to orient in the right way.
But they're not doing the full package.
Yeah. I don't know that the full package could be shown like that. Like the full package is shown in your relationships. It's shown in your,
I'm not saying you can be everything.
Yeah.
But you know what I'm saying?
It's
like David Hart's, David Hart is very vicious to Trump people. So he doesn't understand agape love as it relates to the enemy. And he practices his mouth by, and I love the guy's message about love and creation and so forth. And I want to have him on again, but he speaks very viciously and dehumanizing to people who are Trump supporters. So he's obviously not using his platform to be consistent with the agape love of the Samaritan. And I don't want to judge him, but get it right. Let's get it right. Mm-hmm. The stakes are too high to not get it right, and let's just be loving and gentle, but honest about these things. Jordan Peterson, again, doesn't want to engage in the true physical mimetic role modeling of Jesus Christ. I showed that in my interview with him where I presented him opportunities and he just kept wanting to take it into the psychological realm, which doesn't allow for you to address things that are politically high charged, as he has failed to do. Every time there's been a high charged thing, he'll go up to the line and then fall back, Mm-hmm. He's always used as like a court jester for the establishment. But I mean we've got to find people who are willing to connect the full picture and still maintain agape, radical love as the means of healing these problems. Meaning you're willing to talk about the truth of the pandemic. You're willing to talk the truth about wars and our allies around the world that we're not allowed to question. We're willing to challenge these things, but with a spirit of agape love for the other. If that would be the effusive framework of our language and our attitude, we could change the world. And what I'm saying is, here's the good news, James. Because we don't have that, but look at how effective, well, I won't say it's that effective, but we are still, the folks who are not going along with the nihilism and globalism, despite not really getting it right at all or having a lot of role models, there's no C.S. Lewis's, there's no, we're still doing pretty good. So imagine how much more so it could be good in terms of changing the world if we really got it together. If we
what do you make of
our attitudes right? The whole world's the limit.
What do you make of RFK?
Again, he's an example of someone who, he's directionally going where I'm talking about, for sure. Mm-hmm. Absolutely. I would say he's going, I don't know. In some ways he's going more to the agape love mm-hmm. message than the other people you mentioned who are more like, claiming to be Christian or close to Christianity.
Yeah. He refrains. They always ask him to, criticize Trump.
Yeah.
And even Biden, and he won't I see him struggling with it, and him talking about how he beat his heroin addiction was really profound to me. I'm like, wow, that's really, he's a really interesting guy. What do you think about Tucker Carlson?
I think Tucker is also doing really powerful things in challenging the lies of the neoconservatism and the lies of war, the lies of nihilism. But again, I think you're right about Kennedy in the sense that, there's a lot we could criticize too there, but it's interesting because JFK is, again, this kind of iconic brand of the establishment, Americana. And it's so weird how the establishment, he was on, it was just factions fighting, for earthly power. But, they killed him. There's always a million reasons as to why, but it seemed to be for establishment purposes that have maintained since his death. Mm-hmm. And yet they were able to effectively absorb his mythology into the zeitgeist of the establishment, unlike Nixon, who remained a villain. Mm-hmm. Nixon wasn't physically killed, but they he had such a landslide victory, and then they just systematically demolished that man and put him out as a villain permanently.
He ended the Vietnam War. He started the EPA. Title IX was done under Nixon. Same thing with Jimmy Carter, was the first president, only president not to fire a shot at all. And those are the two biggest diminished presidents. Carter was just a weak. He was the actual, and why I might not agree with Jimmy Carter's explicit politics, but he's a follower of Jesus, I'd say. Yeah. Right. And I don't
know how he got the Russia hoax wrong so badly, but
they all did, it's, he governed that way. And those that are like Trump didn't start a new war. Jimmy Carter was the first president not to really shoot a shot, really. Right. And Nixon ended the Vietnam War. And those are the three most ridiculed, diminished presidents in the world. Yeah. So it goes to my theory of how do you find the truth when you're engaging with the establishment? You multiply by -1. It's as simple as that. Multiply by -1. The inverse of what's being shown to you is usually pretty accurately the truth. Right.
But they don't. Yeah. But when it comes to Kennedy, they don't care for him because that brand Kennedy has been so integrated into the mythology of the establishment, and he's taking that brand name and he's saying Fauci is criminally involved with crimes against humanity. I mean, that's playing off key by a lot, and he challenges the military industrial complex and the pharmaceutical industrial complex. And I like how his rhetoric is trying to not, otherize people. And so, that's an example of directionally going in the right direction. But we have to be even bolder than that and say, let's keep going all the way, and let's not just talk about how the establishment's medicine is wrong, but let's talk about what to actually do to heal people. Because again, that is the stronghold by which there's a reason why the New Testament seems to identify diseases as spiritual warfare. Mm-hmm. Right. And so what is America known for? Being heavily fat and diseased.
Chronic disease.
So what do you do? What do you do if you're in a warfare or spiritual warfare? You start healing diseases.
Amen to that.
See, isn't that cool? So that's so exciting because there's so much fun to do with that. Mm-hmm. But the difficulty is that you will not be safe because you'll be modeling something distinctively new and radical and strange. And that's what it means to be a Christian. But you'll do it, and it's going to rattle the cages of the religious folks. That's going to be the hardest thing. Is the religious folks are going to try to rein you back in and say, whoa, let's do the Bud Light boycott. Let's just do that. No, come on, man. Let's go cure cancer as our priority, or let's go cure, and so that's kind of where we have to go. We cannot fight the shiny new toy. Okay. We don't want to be judgmental for people who get caught up in the shiny new toys, right? That's another thing, right? I'm trying to be fair. It's so hard, because a lot of folks who talk about things directionally the same way are like progressive Christians, talk the same way I'm talking, but they just have such a hatred for their conservative and Trump people. They just can't get over that. And I don't know how to help them.
That's the spell. It's hard to break that spell, man. It's hard to break it.
And but that's the focus should be, is how do we get people to, and the only way you can do that is through your life, and through art, you know, and documentaries, poetry, you know, using the language that they like and using it to bear witness to the truth and the personhood of the people they hate.
And
That's
I think prayer is absolutely necessary. Prayer is absolutely key. It is the linchpin. It's the threshold. Continuous prayer. I'm going to Mount Athos first time with my 9-year-old next week. Actually, I'm going to stay there a few nights, and I'm a little nervous about it. He's 9. You know, no electricity. We're staying at a couple of monasteries there. Go to the services at 2-3 in the morning. You know, and then his son's like, "What are we going to do all day there?" He said, "We pray. We continuously pray. That's what the monks do." And we're going to a place where there have been holy people, saints, monks praying continuously for 1,000 years, unstopped, just continuously. We're going to see a relic of Saint Demetrius, 4th, 5th century, saint is there. And like, just to be in that place, I'm extremely humbled that this opportunity kind of came up for me to go there. But I think this prayer is the linchpin there, and continuous prayer, right? Yeah, I pray every night with my son, teach me to pray and pray yourself within me. Illumine my heart, guide my will. Illumine my heart, guide my will. Teach me to pray and pray yourself within me. Like this reciprocal, and that is kind of the umbilical cord to the kingdom of heaven. It's through prayer, where we're kind of nurtured, through that process.
And that's why Jesus says, when you pray as if it has already been done unto you. Mm-hmm. Which goes back to, we believe in the future, because the reason why it's so hard to pray like that is because we're scared that it won't come true. Mm-hmm. Right. But if you believe in the future, if we believe that we're the people of the future, then we need to manifest the future into the present. So when you pray as if it's already been done unto you. So say, Lord, thank you for healing America of its imperial addiction. Thank you for healing this hysteria about gender. Thank you for reconciling neighbor and brother. And thank you for healing diabetes and eliminating cancer. Thank you for eliminating this idolatry towards globalism. Thank you for giving us the opportunity to learn your ways, so that we have been able to defeat. Just keep saying that over and over again, and you are manifesting the future of Earth into the present with your heart, your soul, your mind, and that manifests into becoming real in our time. So that's exciting, right?
Yeah, I think prayer is a mode of perception that's been lost. It's a way of seeing, like we see with our eyes. Prayer is a mode of perception. McLuhan said that faith is a mode of perception. So it's I think we could leave it there on a good positive note, man. I appreciate you.
Thanks, James. I appreciate you coming on. Thank you.
Yeah. Till next time. God bless.